You're standing at your own wedding reception in Atlanta, Georgia, 250 guests watching when your new mother-in-law grabs the microphone and announces to everyone that you're not good enough for her son because you're a single mom. That happened to me 8 months ago, and what I'm about to tell you will restore your faith in love, Black love, and family. My name is Keisha Montgomery, and I'm a 33-year-old ICU nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital who thought I'd found my happily ever after with Jamal Robinson, a Detroit firefighter who relocated to the ATL and swept me off my feet 3 years ago. Jamal didn't just fall in love with me. He fell head over heels for my 9-year-old son, Malik, too. He's this incredible little boy with the most beautiful brown skin, tight coils he's learning to love, and a smile that can light up any room, even after my longest shift saving lives in the ICU. But Jamal's mother, the legendary Claudette Robinson, made it crystal clear from day one that she thought her precious son was making the biggest mistake of his life by marrying someone with baggage. Claudette is one of those church mothers who smiles sweetly while delivering the most cutting remarks you've ever heard, always prefaced with "bless your heart." She's 62, retired from working as a principal in Detroit public schools, and has this way of making you feel 2 inches tall with just a look over her reading glasses. The tension in our family was impossible to ignore. My best friend LaShonda, who became my maid of honor, witnessed Claudette's behavior firsthand at family dinners in our southwest Atlanta neighborhood, where she'd make comments like, "Well, I suppose not everyone gets to start with a clean slate," or, "Jamal has always been too generous for his own good, just like his daddy was." Even Jamal's brother, Darnell, who's usually the peacekeeper of the family and runs a barbershop in Cascade, would shift uncomfortably when his mother started her passive-aggressive attacks directed at me and my son. But here's what Claudette didn't know, and what made the story one I'll never forget. Jamal had been watching, listening, and planning. He knew exactly what kind of woman his mother was, and he prepared for the possibility that she might try to humiliate me on our wedding day at our beautiful venue in College Park. What he did next, and how my little Malik became the hero of our story, will blow your mind. I'm about to tell you how a letter written by my husband and delivered by my 9-year-old son turned what should have been the most humiliating moment of my life into something that left 250 wedding guests in tears and changed our family forever. This isn't just a story about standing up to bullies in the Black community. It's about what happens when someone loves you so completely that they're willing to fight for your worth even when you can't fight for yourself. Let me take you back to where this all began, because understanding how Jamal and I met will help you appreciate just how calculated and cruel Claudette's attack really was. 3 years ago, I was juggling 12-hour shifts at Grady Memorial Hospital with single motherhood, barely keeping my head above water in our East Point apartment. Malik was 6 then, and I was constantly worried I wasn't giving him enough attention between work, taking him to get his haircut at the barbershop, school pickups, and the exhaustion that comes with doing everything alone as a Black single mother. My ex-husband had walked out when Malik was 4, deciding that fatherhood wasn't for him, leaving me to rebuild our lives from scratch in Atlanta's competitive landscape. That September, the fire department came to Malik's elementary school in Decatur for a safety demonstration. I was running late after a particularly brutal night shift, still in my scrubs, when I rushed into the gymnasium to find Malik sitting cross-legged on the floor, completely mesmerized by this tall, dark-skinned firefighter with a perfectly lined beard who was showing the kids how to stop, drop, and roll. Jamal had this commanding presence without raising his voice, that confident Black man energy that immediately made you feel safe. And when he smiled at the children, his whole face lit up, revealing a dimple in his left cheek. After the presentation, Malik ran up to me, bubbling with excitement. "Mom, did you see the fireman?" He said I asked the smartest question about fire safety. I looked over to see Jamal walking toward us, and when our eyes met, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not just attraction, but a sense of safety, like maybe navigating life as a Black single mother in Atlanta didn't have to be so scary anymore. Jamal introduced himself with that deep voice and northern accent that stood out in the ATL and complimented Malik's curiosity. Instead of the usual adult small talk, he crouched down to Malik's level and asked about his favorite subjects in school. When Malik told him he loved science, Jamal promised to bring him a book about firefighters and science the next time he visited the school. That's when I knew he was different from every other man I'd dated since my divorce. Brothers in Atlanta can be funny about dating single mothers, especially those of us working in healthcare and juggling everything. But Jamal was different. Our first official date wasn't dinner and a movie in Buckhead. Jamal suggested a family-friendly afternoon at the National Center for Civil and Human Rights in downtown Atlanta because, as he put it in that Detroit accent, "If we're going to do this, I want to get to know both of you." I watched him spend 4 hours patiently explaining exhibits to Malik, celebrating his excitement over every discovery about our history, never once acting like his presence was an inconvenience. By the end of the day, Malik was holding his hand as naturally as he held mine. Over the following months, Jamal integrated himself into our lives so seamlessly it felt like he'd always been there. He showed up for Malik's school plays, helped with homework on Black history, and learned to do his edge-ups and twist his hair better than I could. When Malik had nightmares, Jamal would tell him stories about brave Black firefighters who kept everyone safe throughout history. When I worked night shifts at Grady, he'd stay over to make sure Malik wasn't alone, reading him bedtime stories about African kings and making pancakes in the morning. The proposal came 8 months ago at the Cascade Family Skating Rink, a staple in Southwest Atlanta's Black community. Jamal had coordinated with LaShonda to set up a special moment where Malik got to help him ask me to marry him. Malik presented me with a ring pop while Jamal got down on one knee with the real thing, asking if he could officially become his second dad. Malik's squeal of delight probably could be heard all the way to Camp Creek Parkway. But from the moment Jamal brought me home to meet his family in Detroit during Thanksgiving, Claudette made her disapproval crystal clear. The first thing she said to me wasn't "nice to meet you," or "welcome to the family." She looked me up and down in her church hat and asked, "So, how long were you married before?" When I explained that my ex-husband had left when Malik was young, she nodded knowingly and said, "Well, that explains a lot about why you ended up alone with a child." Family dinners in Detroit became exercises in endurance. Claudette would make comments about how challenging it must be for Jamal to take on someone else's responsibilities, especially another man's Black son. She'd ask pointed questions about my work schedule at Grady, wondering aloud how I could possibly give Jamal the attention he deserved when I was so focused on that boy. She even suggested that maybe we should wait a few more years to get married until Malik was older and less dependent, saying, "Y'all young folks rush into things." Jamal defended me every time, but I could see the strain it put on him. Darnell would try to change the subject, and LaShonda, who came to a few family gatherings, would literally bite her tongue to keep from snapping back. The worst part was that Claudette was always sweet as pie to Malik's face, which made her comments about my son even more infuriating. As our wedding day approached in Atlanta, my anxiety reached an all-time high. I confided in LaShonda that I was terrified Claudette would find a way to ruin our special day at our venue in College Park. What if she objects during the ceremony? What if she makes a scene at the reception? I asked her during my final dress fitting at a boutique in Lenox. LaShonda assured me that Jamal would handle his mother, but deep down I knew Claudette was planning something. The morning of our wedding, as I sat getting my makeup done by my favorite makeup artist in Midtown Atlanta, I tried to push away the knot in my stomach. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Claudette was going to make sure I remembered it for all the wrong reasons. The ceremony itself was absolutely perfect, like something out of Essence magazine. Jamal looked so handsome in his charcoal gray suit, and when I walked down the aisle with Malik by my side as my ring bearer, I saw tears in his eyes. Claudette sat in the front row, wearing all black to a summer wedding, which should have been my first warning, but I was too caught up in the magic of the moment to care. We exchanged vows under a beautiful archway of white roses and greenery. Jamal's words were so heartfelt that half the congregation was crying, including LaShonda, who was trying not to smudge her perfectly beat face. When he promised to love and protect both Malik and me for the rest of his life, referencing our ancestors and the strength of Black love, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. Even Claudette managed to smile during the ceremony, though it looked more like she was gritting her teeth. The reception started off wonderfully at our venue in College Park, a beautiful space popular for Black weddings in the Atlanta area. Our venue had these gorgeous chandeliers and uplighting in our wedding colors, creating the most romantic atmosphere for our 250 guests. Malik was having the time of her life, doing the Dougie on the dance floor in his little suit, his fresh haircut gleaming under the lights. He made friends with the other children immediately and spent the cocktail hour teaching them the latest dance moves. During our first dance to Adorn by Miguel, Jamal whispered in my ear with that Detroit accent, "See, everything's perfect. Stop worrying about my mother." I let myself relax into his arms, feeling the stress of the past few months melting away. When the song ended, Malik ran up and insisted on a family dance. So the three of us swayed together while the photographer captured what I thought would be my favorite moment of the day. Dinner went smoothly with everyone raving about the soul food spread, fried chicken, mac and cheese, collard greens, candied yams, and laughing at Darnell's stories about Jamal's childhood mishaps growing up in Detroit. Malik sat at the head table between Jamal and me, proudly wearing the special chain Jamal had given him that morning with a pendant that read "Son." He was chattering away to anyone who would listen about how excited he was to have a new daddy and maybe get a baby brother or sister someday. Then came the traditional speech portion of the evening, and my stomach started to tighten again. Darnell stood up first and delivered the most beautiful best man speech about how he'd never seen his brother happier than he'd been since meeting me. He talked about watching Jamal transform from a confirmed bachelor in Detroit into a devoted family man in Atlanta, and how Malik had brought out a side of Jamal that even his own family had never seen. LaShonda followed with her maid of honor speech, telling the story of how she'd watched me struggle as a single black mother in Atlanta and how amazing it was to see me finally find someone who appreciated my strength instead of seeing it as a burden. She raised her glass to the man who saw Keisha and Malik as a package deal and said, "Jackpot, baby." The whole room erupted in applause and laughter, with guests snapping their fingers and calling out yes. I was starting to think we'd made it through the danger zone when Claudette suddenly pushed back her chair and stood up. My heart dropped into my stomach. Jamal immediately tensed beside me, and I saw Darnell's face go pale. LaShonda actually half rose from her seat, ready to intervene, her Atlanta attitude fully activated. But Claudette had already walked to the front of the room with purpose, her church hat still perfectly in place. She approached the DJ and held out her hand for the microphone. "I'd like to say a few words about my son," she announced with that saccharine smile I'd come to dread. The room fell silent, sensing the shift in energy. Jamal started to stand, but Claudette waved him back down with false cheerfulness. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate Jamal today," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system with that proper way she spoke. "My son has always been special to me. He's kind, generous, and caring to a fault. Sometimes too caring if you ask me." My hand started trembling in my lap. Malik, who had been playing with his toy car, looked up with curiosity at the sudden change in atmosphere. Several guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the joy of moments before evaporating. "Jamal deserves the very best in life," Claudette continued, her smile never wavering even as her words grew sharper. "He deserves a woman who can give him everything he needs, everything he dreams of. He deserves someone who can focus completely on him and their future together." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears as I realized where this was headed. Jamal was gripping his napkin, so tightly his knuckles looked lighter against his dark skin. Then Claudette delivered the blow that I'll never forget. He deserves a real woman who can give him a fresh start, not someone who comes with another man's child as baggage. A single mother will never be able to love him completely because she'll always put that child first. My son deserves better than second place in his own marriage. He deserves to build his own family from scratch, not raise another man's black son. The silence that followed was deafening. 250 guests sat frozen, unsure whether they'd actually heard what they thought they'd heard. Several people gasped audibly. LaShonda jumped to her feet, her face contorted with fury, ready to go full Atlanta on Claudette. Jamal looked like he was about to explode. Several of his firefighter friends from Detroit were halfway out of their seats. But before anyone could react, something extraordinary happened. Malik quietly set down his toy car and walked toward the front of the room. What I'm about to tell you shows just how well Jamal knew his mother and how much he loved us. 3 weeks before our wedding, while I was stressing about centerpieces and making sure our wedding coordinated with Atlanta's unpredictable weather, Jamal was quietly preparing for psychological warfare. It happened on a Sunday afternoon when I was pulling an extra shift at Grady Memorial Hospital. Jamal had taken Malik to Piedmont Park, and when I got home that evening to our East Point apartment, I found them sitting together on the couch having what looked like a very serious conversation. Malik's face was unusually thoughtful, and Jamal had that protective expression he got whenever someone had hurt one of us. "Everything okay?" I asked, settling down beside them, still in my scrubs. Jamal smiled and gave Malik's shoulder a squeeze, but I caught the look that passed between them like they were sharing a secret. "Yeah, babe, just talking about grown-up stuff," he said in that Detroit accent. "You know how sometimes adults say things that aren't very nice when they're scared or worried?" I didn't think much of it at the time. Jamal was always having these deep conversations with Malik, helping him understand the world as a young black boy in Atlanta. He'd explained everything from why his biological father left to why some kids at school might say mean things about having divorced parents. I trusted his judgment completely when it came to preparing Malik for life's challenges. What I didn't know was that Jamal had been watching his mother's behavior escalate as our wedding approached. At our rehearsal dinner, just 4 days earlier at a restaurant in Cascade, Claudette had cornered LaShonda in the bathroom and made some comment about how unfortunate it was that Jamal was throwing his life away on a woman with complications. She'd also asked Darnell if he thought there was any way to talk sense into Jamal before it's too late. Jamal had grown up with Claudette in Detroit. He knew her patterns, her triggers, and most importantly, her need to be the center of attention at family gatherings. He'd witnessed her dramatic outbursts at family events for 35 years. The woman who had objected to every girlfriend he'd ever brought home, who had found fault with every major decision he'd made, was not going to let his wedding day in Atlanta pass without making her feelings known. So Jamal made a decision that showed just how much he understood both his mother and our family dynamic. He sat Malik down and explained that sometimes people say hurtful things at weddings, especially about families that look different from what they expected. He told him that Grandma Claudette might be scared about changes in the family and might say something unkind about me or about him. "But here's the thing, little man," he'd said to Malik that Sunday afternoon in our apartment. "If anyone ever tries to make your mom feel bad or make you feel like you don't belong in our family, I want you to know that I'll always stand up for both of you. In fact, I'm going to give you something special just in case." That's when Jamal pulled out a sealed envelope with Malik's name written on it in his careful handwriting. Inside was a letter he'd spent hours crafting, choosing every word carefully to express exactly how he felt about our family and his commitment to us. "This is a very important letter," he told Malik, his voice serious but not scary. "If Grandma Claudette or anyone else says something mean about your mom at our wedding, I want you to take this letter, ask for the microphone, and read it out loud to everyone. Can you do that for me?" Malik had nodded solemnly, understanding that this was a big responsibility. Jamal made sure he knew exactly what to do. Walk calmly to the front politely, ask for the microphone, announce that his new daddy had asked him to read something, and then read every word, clearly and loudly. They practiced it twice that afternoon, with Jamal playing the role of someone saying mean things and Malik practicing his response. He made sure Malik understood that this wasn't about being scary or confrontational, but about sharing the truth with everyone who cared about our family, especially in the Black community where family means everything. The envelope went into Malik's special pocket, the inside pocket of his little suit jacket. Jamal told him to keep it with him during the reception, just in case. He even had LaShonda discreetly check that Malik had it with him when we arrived at the venue in College Park. The brilliant part of Jamal's plan was that he knew his mother's psychology. Claudette thrived on shock value and drama, but she was also someone who wilted when confronted directly, especially in front of the Black community. She cared so much about impressing. She could dish out cruelty when she thought she had the upper hand, but she crumbled when faced with consequences for her actions in front of church folks and family. Jamal also understood that anything he said in response to his mother's attack would look like a son defending his new wife, which Claudette could dismiss or twist into disrespect. But having his words delivered by Malik, the very child she was attacking, would be devastating and undeniable in a way that would resonate with every Black parent in that room. As I watched my 9-year-old son walk confidently toward that microphone, I realized that the man I just married had been protecting us in ways I never even knew we needed protection. The sight of my 9-year-old son walking toward that microphone while 250 guests held their collective breath is burned into my memory forever. Malik moved with such quiet confidence, his little suit perfectly tailored, his fresh haircut gleaming under the lights, his chin held high the way Jamal had taught him. Despite being one of the smallest people in that massive room, Malik carried himself like a young king. Claudette was still standing at the front, frozen in shock at seeing Malik approach. The woman who had just delivered the most devastating public humiliation of my life suddenly looked uncertain, like she hadn't expected any kind of response, especially not from a child, and definitely not from the very child she had just called baggage. Several guests were whispering to each other in that way black folks do when drama is unfolding, clearly wondering what was happening. Some were already pulling out their phones, sensing this was about to be a moment worth recording. Malik walked right up to Claudette and looked up at her with those beautiful brown eyes that matched mine. In the clearest, most polite voice you've ever heard, with all the home training I'd instilled in him, he said, "Excuse me, Grandma Claudette. May I please have the microphone? My new daddy, Jamal, asked me to read something if anyone said mean things about my mom." The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on that hardwood floor. Claudette's face went through about 5 different expressions in 2 seconds, from confusion to horror to panic as she realized she'd been outmaneuvered by a 9-year-old black child. Her hand shook slightly as she passed the microphone down to Malik, who took it with both hands and held it close to his mouth, just like Jamal had taught him. "Hi, everyone," Malik began, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system to all 250 guests. "My name is Malik and I'm the ring bearer. My new daddy, Jamal, wrote me a letter and told me to read it if someone said anything mean about my mom. So here it is." He pulled the envelope from his inside pocket with careful fingers, unfolded the letter, and began to read in that serious way children have when they know something is important. "Dear wedding guests, if you're hearing this letter, it means someone at our celebration has questioned whether Keisha deserves to be my wife or whether our family is somehow less than perfect. Let me be absolutely clear about something. I did not settle when I married Keisha. I hit the jackpot." The first few words hit the room like a thunderbolt. People started leaning forward in their seats, and I saw several guests already tearing up, fans coming out to wave in front of faces. Jamal was watching Malik with such pride and love that I felt my heart might burst. LaShonda was gripping the table, eyes already glistening. Malik continued reading, his voice strong and clear. "Keisha is not damaged goods. She is not a consolation prize. She is not someone who comes with baggage. Keisha is a black woman who loved her son so much that she found the courage to leave a marriage that wasn't working to give Malik a better life. She worked night shifts as an ICU nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital, taking care of critically ill patients while her own son slept, just to keep them afloat in Atlanta. She went back to school, built a career in healthcare, and created a home where Malik could feel safe and loved as a young black boy in America. My hands were pressed to my mouth, tears streaming down my face, ruining my makeup. Around the room, I could see people nodding, some wiping their eyes, women fanning themselves. Even some of Claudette's church friends from Detroit looked uncomfortable with what she had said. Several guests were saying, "Mm-hmm," and that's right under their breath. "When I met Keisha and Malik," Malik read on, his voice growing stronger with each word, "I didn't see a woman with complications. I saw a family that already knew how to love unconditionally. Malik didn't come with Keisha as an obligation or a burden. He came as a gift. I'm not taking on someone else's child. I'm being welcomed into a family that's going to teach me what real love looks like, what black love at its finest looks like." The emotion in that room was overwhelming. LaShonda was openly sobbing, saying, "Yes, baby, yes." Darnell had his head in his hands, clearly mortified by his mother's behavior. Several of Jamal's firefighter buddies from Detroit were nodding approvingly, and I could see Malik's teacher from his school in Decatur beaming with pride. But Malik wasn't finished. He took a breath and delivered the final blow. "To anyone who thinks Keisha should put me before Malik, you don't understand what kind of man I am. I fell in love with Keisha exactly because she puts Malik first. That's not a flaw. That's the kind of mother I want for all our future children. That's the kind of love I want to be part of. Keisha doesn't love me less because she loves Malik completely. She loves me more because she's already proven she knows how to love someone with her whole heart. That's the foundation of black families. That's how we survive and thrive." The silence that followed was profound. Then from somewhere in the back of the room near the dessert table, someone started clapping. Within seconds, the entire reception erupted in thunderous applause. People were standing, cheering, some actually whooping with joy like they were at a revival. LaShonda was on her feet yelling, "Yes!" like she was at a Falcons game. Several guests were waving their hands in the air, calling out, "Amen," and "Preach." Malik looked around at all the applause with wide eyes, clearly surprised by the reaction. He carefully folded the letter back up, put it in his inside pocket, and then did something that made everyone laugh and cheer even louder. He walked over to me, climbed up on my lap, and said into the microphone with perfect comedic timing, "Also, my mom makes the best pancakes and turkey bacon ever, so Daddy Jamal is really lucky. And she lets me get haircuts at Uncle Darnell's barbershop." The room exploded with laughter and more applause. People were standing, clapping, some doing the electric slide right there by their tables. The DJ, sensing the moment, started playing Love on Top by Beyoncé. Claudette had disappeared completely, probably slipping out during the speech. Her church had the last thing visible as she made her exit. But honestly, in that moment, I didn't care where she'd gone. My son had just defended our family with more grace and power than I ever could have managed, representing for every black single mother who's ever been judged. The immediate aftermath of Malik's speech was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. As the applause finally died down and Beyoncé faded out, guests started approaching our table in waves, wanting to congratulate us and share their own stories. The energy in that college park venue had completely transformed. Jamal's fire chief from Detroit came over first, a big brother with gray in his beard, shaking Jamal's hand and telling him that was the finest piece of leadership he'd ever witnessed. "You protected your family without disrespecting your mother to her face," he said. "That takes real character, especially for a black man caught between his mama and his wife." What struck me most was how many people opened up about their own blended families in the black community. The couple from Jamal's station house in Detroit told us about the challenges they'd faced when he adopted her 3 children from a previous marriage, raising black children who weren't biologically his. My colleague from Grady Memorial shared how her stepfather had saved her life by choosing to love her unconditionally when her mother remarried in their Stone Mountain neighborhood. Even some of the older guests, the church mothers who I'd worried might judge me, came over to share stories of family members who'd found love the second time around in Atlanta, Detroit, Memphis, and beyond. Malik was absolutely glowing from all the attention. He spent the rest of the reception being treated like a celebrity, with other children asking him about the letter and adults telling him how brave he was. Jamal scooped him up at one point and whispered something in his ear that made him giggle. When I asked what he'd said, Malik announced proudly, "Daddy said I did good protecting our family like black men are supposed to do." LaShonda was practically vibrating with excitement, her Atlanta energy at maximum. "Did you see Claudette's face?" She kept asking anyone who would listen, snapping her fingers for emphasis. That church lady didn't know what hit her. A 9-year-old just delivered the most devastating takedown in black wedding history. "This is going viral, I'm telling you." She made sure the photographer and videographer got footage of Malik holding the letter, saying it needed to be preserved for posterity and for the culture. "This needs to be on the Shade Room," she declared. Claudette had indeed vanished completely. Darnell came over about an hour later looking absolutely mortified, apologizing for his mother's behavior. "I've never been more ashamed of a family member in my life," he said, his barber's hands gesturing expressively. "What she did was unforgivable, and what you 3 did in response was pure class. That's how you handle family business with dignity." He promised to handle any fallout with his mother back in Detroit, and made it clear that we had his complete support. "Y'all are family now, and in our barbershop, we stand up for family," he said, referring to his shop in the Cascade area. The rest of our wedding was magical in a way I never could have imagined. Instead of being remembered as the reception where the mother-in-law caused drama, it became the celebration where a young black boy stood up for love and family in the most beautiful way possible. People danced later to Frankie Beverly and Maze, laughed harder, and celebrated more joyfully because they'd witnessed something truly special. The DJ played everything from old-school jams to the latest Atlanta trap music, and that dance floor stayed packed until the venue closed. Several guests told us they'd been to hundreds of black weddings in Atlanta, Detroit, Chicago, Houston, and D.C., but they'd never seen anything like what happened that night in College Park. But the real test came in the weeks and months that followed. For about 3 months, we heard nothing from Claudette back in Detroit. Jamal was actually relieved, saying it gave us time to settle into married life in our new home in southwest Atlanta without her negativity. We moved into a bigger house near Cascade where Malik could have his own room and a backyard to play in. And I watched my son bloom as he adjusted to having a full-time father figure who genuinely adored him and taught him how to be a strong black man. Then around Thanksgiving, Claudette called Jamal. She was crying, which apparently was extremely rare for her, especially for a woman who prided herself on being strong and stoic. She asked if she could fly down to Atlanta to talk, not to Jamal alone, but to all 3 of us. When she arrived at our southwest Atlanta home, she looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than the woman in the church hat who had terrorized our wedding day in College Park. She'd flown in from Detroit without her usual armor of pride. Her apology was genuine and detailed. She admitted that she'd been terrified of losing her son to a life in Atlanta, that she convinced herself that if Jamal focused on Malik and me, there wouldn't be room for her in his life anymore. She acknowledged that her behavior had been cruel, and that she tried to destroy something beautiful because she was scared of being left behind and forgotten in Detroit while we built our life in the ATL. What surprised me most was her direct apology to Malik. She got down on his level, something church mothers rarely do, and said, "I said some very mean things about you and your mama at the wedding, and that was wrong. You're not baggage. You're a gift, just like your daddy's letter said. You're a strong young black king, and I should have seen that from the beginning." She asked Malik if she could try to be a better grandma. And Malik, with the generous heart that children have, said yes. The relationship rebuild has been slow but steady. Claudette now makes trips down from Detroit to Atlanta for Malik's school events and has learned to ask about his day with genuine interest, asking about his grades and his friends in that southwest Atlanta neighborhood. She still has moments where her old controlling nature surfaces, that church mother tendency to think she knows best. But now Jamal shuts it down immediately, and surprisingly she backs off. 8 months after our wedding in College Park, Jamal and I got the most wonderful news. I'm pregnant with our first child together. Malik is over the moon about becoming a big brother, already planning everything he's going to teach the baby about being black in Atlanta. When we told Claudette over FaceTime, she cried again, but this time with joy. She's already making plans to spend more time in Atlanta to help with the baby, and keeps asking Malik what kind of grandmother she wants her to be. She even joined the church we attend here in southwest Atlanta, flying down from Detroit once a month for service. That letter from our wedding day now hangs framed in our living room in southwest Atlanta, not as a reminder of conflict, but as a testament to the power of black love and preparation. It taught me that the right person doesn't just accept your past, they celebrate it as the foundation of who you've become. The most important lesson from that day wasn't about standing up to bullies or defending your family, though those things matter especially in the black community where our families are constantly judged. It was about recognizing that love multiplies rather than divides. Jamal didn't love me less because I came with Malik. He loved me more because I'd already proven I knew how to love completely and sacrifice for family, the way black mothers have done for generations. Sometimes the people who seem determined to tear you down are just scared of being forgotten. And sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is simply telling the truth with love, especially in our community where truth and love built by our ancestors are what sustain us. If you've made it this far in my story, it probably means you've either experienced something similar or you're someone who believes in the power of black love to overcome fear and cruelty. Either way, I'm grateful you listened. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own journey with blended families, black love after heartbreak, or standing up to people who try to tear you down in our community, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Share it with every black single mother in Atlanta, Detroit, Houston, Chicago, Memphis, D.C., or wherever you're watching from who needs to know that her past doesn't define her future. Leave a comment below telling me about your own experiences with finding love in unexpected places or dealing with family members who don't understand your choices. Tell me about your own mother-in-law stories, your own blended family victories, or how you've navigated being a single parent in the black community. I want to hear from my sisters in Southwest Atlanta, College Park, Stone Mountain, and beyond. And if you want to hear more stories about real Black people navigating the messy, beautiful, complicated world of modern relationships and family dynamics in cities like Atlanta, Detroit, and across America, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. These aren't just stories. They're reminders that Black love wins, truth matters, and sometimes the smallest voices carry the most powerful messages. Thank you for being part of our family story and for celebrating Black excellence, Black resilience, and Black love with us. Until next time, remember that you deserve someone who doesn't just accept your past, but celebrates it as the reason you became strong enough to love them completely. From our family in Southwest Atlanta to yours, wherever you are, keep loving, keep believing, and keep building the families our ancestors dreamed of for us.